We're very pleased to have Justin Huang speaking today. Justin Huang is in the marketing group at Michigan. He's going to talk about political bias in social media content moderation. If you can, because of the, if you are listening online, could you please turn your cameras on so that we can see you? Otherwise, we can't see you here in this room. Justin said he'd like to give this talk seminar style, i.e. please welcomes questions and comments and interruptions throughout. So please, if you've got a question, raise your hand and I will acknowledge you. The floor is yours, Justin.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. I don't know if you knew this about me, but I actually got my PhD here in 2018. So it's wonderful to be coming home. It's wonderful to be in this classroom. I think I had actually an econometrics class right here. So feeling right at home, although on the other side of the table. Very excited to be sharing both this research and just have a broader discussion around the polarization of social media. So in terms of a just brief agenda for today, we'll talk about the polarization of social media, talk about why it seems to be the case that oftentimes we're talking past each other. Why is it the case that people are oftentimes in bubbles, seemingly they're in their own little information environment? What implications does that have? And essentially we'll have this discussion through the lens of one of my research projects that looks specifically at the moderation of content by users moderating other users in the context of Reddit. So just a brief agenda, we'll talk a little bit about echo chambers, just set things up, why are we interested in them, looking at a brief model, got a little diagram of belief polarization and how that occurs online, talk about how my research connects into that, talk about both platform and user-driven content moderation, hop into the research itself. This is where actually I love the fact that I see a lot of cameras that are available. Would love you to chime in because I have a lot of slides here. Maybe we'll get to all of them, maybe we won't. Maybe some of them will be more relevant to the audience, maybe not. So your reactions will help me a lot in terms of determining whether or not we should spend a little bit or a little bit less time on each of these. Finally, we'll talk about some findings, then get into implications, mitigations, and conclusions. Sounds good? All right. Awesome. With all that said, just a brief definition to begin with, we'll be talking a lot about online echo chambers. And what do I mean by an echo chamber? Do I consider it to be a binary classification versus more of a continuous one? I'll consider it to be more of a continuous one, right? That there are echo chambers that are more versus less echoey, that are more permissive and have a greater diversity of different voices that are speaking up within them versus less. Right? So when we think about echo chambers, thinking about pushing it towards this extreme, whereby the conversation is increasingly dominated by just one side, and the opposite side is either not participating or excluded. There's been a lot of interest in echo chambers, definitely over the past 4 years, definitely over a broader, maybe decade or so. There's increasing attention to the growth of echo chambers online and what implications they have for our politics and polarization. One of the problems is you might just be talking to an echo chamber, but leave it aside.
Well, that
is true.
I mean, yeah, we can start the questions. Thank you, John.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not all bad.
Yep.
You know, if we had to have the climate justice, Marxist, heterodox view here, it would just be a waste of time. And developing understanding things within a point of view is much more productive. Now, occasionally they talk to each other, but not always.
I agree with that entirely, and definitely there's some research too. I'll show there have been some research on echo chambers and their impacts. There have been some contexts in which echo chambers have been thought to actually be a good thing and can actually decrease polarization of beliefs. And some of that might be through maybe if you only get exposed to extremist voices, that can actually polarize your opinion of the opposite side. That said, you know, given that this is the classical liberalism seminar, I don't usually make arguments through this style, so you know, bear with me a little bit. You could argue that probably we should be permissive to these ideas and that we can only disqualify these ideas or think that they have less merit through their discussion and debate, right? Within reason, right? Within certain norms. But I agree with you, kind of the impact of echo chambers can be sometimes a little bit mixed. That said, you've seen a lot of interest in it, right? You've seen interest from the US government, you've seen interest from platforms, from users in echo chambers, their formation, broader polarization, and it can have a lot of real world impacts, right? Whether it's elections, whether it's geopolitical conflicts that exist, whether it's the COVID-19 pandemic, other medical information or potentially misinformation, violence, extremism, terror attacks, right? And of course, this policy interest is coming in from the fact that if you are in an echo chamber, it can distort your perception of norms. We see a little bit of this, actually a lot of this around elections, right? Where people are perpetually online, they exist in these online spaces. These online spaces are relatively homophilous, right? You're with voices that are similar to your own, that agree with you. And therefore you'll infer levels of support for policy positions, levels of support for candidates from what you're seeing, right? You're in this bubble and seemingly 80, 90% of people support the candidate that you support. And you're like, wow, you know, this candidate must be very popular, this position must be very popular. Surely they're going to win, right? When it comes to the ballot box. Well, what oftentimes happens, we have a lot of very close, especially presidential elections, that number that's voting for your side or the other side is not 80%, right? It's very close to 50-50. And that means that one of those sides is going to be very disappointed. They'll say, you know, hey, maybe this election was illegitimate. Maybe there was foul play at foot, because seemingly from my own observation, this number should be very different, and yet it's realized to be close to even. So potentially some dangers there. Echo chambers, through the fact that we don't have a lot of voices that will disagree, well, they can reinforce users' pre-existing beliefs, right? So we might see individuals shift their beliefs over time because those beliefs aren't being challenged, or because they are adapting to what they see around them. Can radicalize individuals, right? Kind of thinking of continuing to shift, can radicalize them through exposure to extremist views. And those extremist views could go relatively unchallenged because individuals will process information based on their group membership through their lens. And therefore, yeah, someone is saying something maybe a little bit crazy, maybe pretty far out there, but they're on our team, right? And because they're on our team, we might be less likely to challenge those voices, challenge those beliefs. Can also reduce your skepticism towards misinformation. And then coming back to what I talked to, you know, the effects can be somewhat mixed though, right? There was a study, I'll point out this one is the Bale et al. Study in 2018. They had paid Twitter participants to follow politicians of the opposing political party, right? And look to see how paying individuals to follow these opposing politicians might affect their views, right? Maybe it'll moderate their views because then they'll see more of the other side. Turns out that that wasn't the case, at least in their context. And in some discussions with the authors, they had offered a wide variety of explanations. I think it's not the case that they're trying to claim that actually we should be insulated from the other side and that talking to people on the other side is actually counterproductive, but rather that these conversations should be deeper, more authentic, and probably shouldn't be the kind of partisan signaling that politicians typically engage in on social media, right? They're usually making comments to rile up their own base, right, as opposed to speaking across the aisle. Seems like there's a little bit of a question there.
Well, a lot of people don't know quite how crazy the opposition is. Also, you phrase this as a vague policy interest. I'm sure there's such a thing as policy as opposed to politics. Especially recently, a lot of the extremist views, like our own Jay Bhattacharya's, turned out to be right. And that what was characterized as misinformation turned out to be, in fact, completely correct.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Only having a little bit of a home base allowed
Yeah.
people like Jay to get anywhere.
Yeah. No, I agree entirely. And when I characterize misinformation, I mean this very kind of broadly and without a lot of reference to, you know, I'm not going to take a strict stance on what is a ground truth, right? And maybe you could argue that the fact that certain things that were later revealed to be true were previously thought to be misinformation is actually coming in from the fact that there was maybe a less diverse discussion, less kind of both sides talking to each other than there could be, right? The mere categorization is a result of an illustration of the echo chamber in the first place.
As a good libertarian, policy, being someone who has an interest, is whose job is it to make sure that our norms aren't distorted and that our pre-existing beliefs aren't reinforced? Policy usually means government management of this sort of thing, which makes me nervous. But we haven't gotten, this is all preamble. So
it's all preamble, and this is speaking, you know, from a much more descriptive point of view, right? These are the arguments that policymakers have made, and I'll show you. I've got a slide, and it'll come up in like 10 slides or so. But this has been their justification.
Line without complaining. So
yeah. I agree. Hop into a little model of echo chamber formation and belief polarization online. A little bit of something to help frame our discussions as well as place this research within the broader literature. So we have a lot of online spaces that we can choose to participate in online. You could think of these as choosing to join Twitter versus Meta, choosing to engage in TikTok versus Instagram Reels, let's say, right? But it can also be selection of communities and selection of your friends within each of these platforms, right? It's not the case that if you are on Facebook, you're exposed to everyone's information on Facebook, but you'll oftentimes be in smaller groups, right? Smaller groups that have certain characteristics. And we know that individuals exhibit endogenous participation. You could say it's homophily. Regardless of what the mechanism is, you'll find that the groups that people select into are more like themselves, right? More like themselves. And this could be because maybe there's some avoidance of opposite political views, right? You don't like your views being challenged. You like that reinforcement. It could also be very benign in a lot of ways, right? You might have certain interests. Your interests might include going paintballing. Your interests might include certain bands or certain types of music, right? And the types of individuals that engage in those same interests, those same hobbies, are going to be more similar to you than not, right? And therefore, their political views will tend to correlate with yours more often than not. And as a result of that, we are going to see, while, is this a pointer here? Is this a laser?
It's a pointer, it's just hard to see.
It's just very small, okay. You'll see here, we select into communities that are more similar to ourselves, right? There's some selection layer that goes in. Individuals and communities will produce messages, right? A lot of people are chattering, a lot of people create information, create comments, create posts within these groups, but we also recognize that individuals have limited time and attention. Social media platforms have very much recognized this. Social media platforms will look to recommend content that we think is a better match for your views because you're more likely to engage in them. And therefore, you're going to have this filter layer, right? This filter layer coming in through algorithmic recommendations. And in the same way that your endogenous participation will lead to your peers looking more similar to yourself, your algorithmic recommendations will lead to the voices that you hear from among those peers, again, looking more similar to yourself. Again, the platform is looking to maximize your engagement, and generally they found that your engagement is maximized by showing you more content that's similar to what you like.
May I ask a question?
Yes, definitely. Yes,
I
David.
think I heard you say that you look at your hobbies and you're going to tend to select into hobbies with people who have similar political views to yours. Did you say that?
That was just a broader illustration of how your selection into groups can happen and lead to a group of individuals that you're surrounding yourself with that's more similar to your own political points of view, even without you explicitly seeking out and trying to do so. Right? So there are a lot of benign or unconscious mechanisms whereby that selection can occur. That's why the hobbies was an example of that. Yeah.
I think I got a strong counterexample. I'm here in Pacific.
Yeah, definitely.
I just came here 5 minutes late because I was playing pickleball. We don't talk about politics. It's an unwritten rule, but every once in a while it comes up, and I would guess it's about 80 to 20 Democrat on one side and Republican and Libertarian on the other. So and I'm a Libertarian. There's no way I'm selecting into that. I just don't see why your interest in pickleball would lead you to a group that has similar political views.
So I'm not making
If you're a shooter,
What?
if you like hunting, there's probably a very strong correlation.
Okay.
like hunting, you like certain bands, right? Certain music, certain artists. So definitely I'm not making the absolute statement, of course, that every single group that you'll select into reflects your own politics, but more often than not, right? More often than if you were just mixed in amongst the general population. And in the US, that's roughly an even mix of left versus right. Online, and especially in this online domain, the people that are in, let's say, the neighborhood groups, right? This is where a lot of people get neighborhood information, will be a local Facebook group. I live in a complex of around, say, 200 houses or so, right? But those individuals are my neighbors. Ann Arbor is a bluer town than average. So the Facebook group that I participate in and through which I get information about local taxes, school information, right, is going to be very reflective of the area that I'm in. And on average, going to be reflective of my political views, too.
So
Yes.
maybe what David is sort of objecting to, or at least this is, let me word it as my own question, on my own. Yeah, you're giving a very benign view of echo chambers, where, we have a correlation, and so 70% are on the left and 30% are on the right in this group, which that doesn't sound to me that much like an echo chamber if you have a 70-30 mix.
Yeah.
Actually, in echo chambers, I think the views are much more uniform, and in most things that I would think of as echo chambers, they're enforced very strongly by punishment and stigmatization if you say the wrong thing. And so that sounds like a very different story than we just happen to, by correlation and liking pickleball, be in, a group where the politics is imbalanced.
Definitely. And I to that I would say, so 70-30, maybe that's an echo chamber. Is 80-20 then an echo chamber? Right? Is 90-10 then an echo chamber? So I guess through that lens, like I tend to think of echo chambers less as like a binary classification of you're in an echo chamber versus not, versus rather that echo chambers exist in a continuum, right? A 70-30 echo chamber is more echoey than a 60-40 one, right? And is less echoey than an 80-20.
I think we're growing here. There are some groups that are organized around political things, like the anthropology department, or the Twitter get bad at the climate thing. And then there's lots of groups like David's Pickleball that are explicit. We understand this polarization and explicitly a no politics rule. And so most of the sports and stuff that I participate in, there's just a no politics rule, like at the pickleball. We got to get along. But most of the community things, I know on Nextdoor, if you start flaming off about politics, they're going to ban you pretty quickly.
But I think this is evidence that groups naturally, if you don't have good policies and if you don't obey them, they naturally would start, going into one of the extremes.
Now, the fact that our political groups have become much more echoey, and I think Jeff's point is extremely good, not just by choice, but by the small minority, sending off to Siberia anyone who disagrees, that's very salient. And that's what we care about, is the political discussion. If the bowling league doesn't talk about politics, who cares really?
I mean, I would say, so this particular research, and I think it aligns pretty well with my views on it, is that it's definitely both, right? Echo chambers can be explicit, can be coming in through someone's deliberate action to just, it could be, I want to create an echo chamber. It could be that I want to form like a local Democrat chapter or a local Republican chapter, right? But I'm going to take a very agnostic view, just that online spaces are becoming polarized in this way, and all that's shifting in this direction, right, through these mechanisms that are described.
Residential spaces have become polarized. I think there's something halfway between with sort of the people you bump into on a regular basis. There is some political back and forth. And if you bump into the people on my block in Palo Alto, heaven help you if you're conservative, because you just won't find them.
It seems like there's an additional kind of feedback loop which ties in some of these discussions, which is that either because of policies, moderation, punishments, or endogenously because of preferences. Some of these people in this kind of group are going to either exit or be silent, and that's going to make it more echoey.
I agree entirely, and we've got some arrows in the diagram that kind of reflect that, right? And these, there are a lot of more arrows, and there are a lot more mechanisms whereby we can kind of point to specific elements of endogenous participation or specific elements of monopoly, but definitely the entire thing is a self-reinforcing cycle, right? And this is why I will highlight that this can occur unconsciously as well, right? These unconscious actions can also tend these online spaces towards being more echo chambery, and perhaps, right? I don't have empirical support for this, but I'll make more of a theory-based argument for it. Perhaps these unintentional echo chambers could be more persuasive, right? We know within marketing that there's persuasion knowledge, that if individuals know that they're being spoken to in a certain way, they'll have their guard up, they're more cautious about the information that they receive. But perhaps it is your local pickleball group or local basketball group or some non-political space whereby everyone seems to share this point of view. Perhaps it's more persuasive to your politics than one in which you know that you're wading into a certain territory that has a certain orientation to them.
The interesting phenomenon is the politicization of everything. We used to have a bowling league where you didn't discuss politics. There's less of them now.
Exactly. Yeah. And we see this in Reddit communities too. I don't have the data on it, but from my observations of Reddit, and I believe there's some other work on this, even nominally non-political spaces are becoming more politicized. Actually, a great example of it. How many, curiosity, any of you guys browse Reddit? Utilize it regularly? Maybe a couple. r/World News, for example, was already somewhat political, but actually became incredibly polarized on the Israel-Palestine issue after the October 7th attacks. So an example definitely illustrating what you described as spaces that are less political becoming more so over time. Just want to highlight here, all right, so with that definition of echo chamber, remember, we'll think of echo chambers as being a continuum, right? Or at least I will use that as a definition for the purposes of this talk. It's become more echoey as a result of these two mechanisms. Yes?
Do you think your story addresses this change over time? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, if this mechanism has been going on today and it has been going on 5 years ago and 10 years ago,
Yep.
why are things more politicized today, if you believe that to be true?
So I illustrate one mechanism through which it can become more polarized in time, but I think on average, all of these tend to be self-reinforcing, right? So all of what I'll describe here becomes self-reinforcing in
But
some
they were
way.
self-reinforcing 10 years ago.
But the sorting was.
But social media social media existed 10 years ago, and social media
That's what I
didn't.
want to hear. What has changed?
You're saying there's something about the technology of social media that wasn't there in the technology of pamphlets.
I think so.
Yeah.
Changes it.
You
The
live
other
on the
possibilities, politics has become more winner take all. As
Mhm.
we move to government by executive order.
Yep.
You know, it's become much more important to win the political game.
I agree with that 100%. The other thing that I'll say is that social media, even though it existed a decade or so ago, it was still in its adolescence at that time, right? We're seeing the social media environment continue to evolve. Algorithmic recommendations, it doesn't quite point very well, algorithmic recommendations have become so much better, right? The systems that we have today relative to what we had a decade ago are much more effective at surfacing content that you're interested in. People have become more used to operating in this social media environment. People consume more social media content today than they ever have before, right? So all of these are potentially exacerbating this process, and definitely this process is likely to continue, right, going forward. I'll finally highlight, right? So you exist in an echo chamber. You're seeing these particular views. They're not necessarily representative of a broader population. One last thing that makes it worse is the fact that we have biased information processing as well. Whether that's confirmation biases, motivated reasoning, biased assimilation, kind of differential demand for information. The flip side of that is like avoidance or cognitive dissonance, as well as the fact that you might infer your political view from those around you, right? All of those will lead you to become more polarized here. Yes.
So here you're about to lose all the libertarians and free market economists in the audience. And I'm curious whether,
Yeah.
I would summarize those with Owen Lamont's famous summary of behavioral finance.
Yeah.
People are morons. Is it necessary that people are morons for the phenomenon to emerge?
Mhm.
Or is it a phenomenon that would emerge even if people aren't being morons? And all this stuff doesn't exist? Or, I mean, is that icing on the cake, or is it necessary for the cake?
I don't.
We've already talked about some, politics gets more extreme because, because in fact the rewards to winning are bigger.
Yeah.
Or the social media allows you to listen to what you rationally want to listen to better.
Mhm.
You could go with an externality story.
Yeah.
That there was some that people would always choose to listen to an echo chamber, but somehow there's some externality involved. But do you need people to be idiots for this to go through? If we were only more rational, would we all be singing Kumbaya together?
I don't think so. I think a lot of these processes around kind of your self-selection, that doesn't have anything to do with kind of your level of education or intelligence or anything along those lines. The fact that these algorithms will tend to recommend you content that you'll tend to like.
Well, educated people are way worse at this than non-educated people. Every non-education person I know is perfectly sensible. It's the educated ones around Stanford who are lunatics in politics.
Perhaps so, perhaps so. I will say that some of this, right, education is probably, has the biggest impact in terms of information processing. The fact that if you have a more open mind, right, you're less subject to motivated reasoning. You experience less cognitive dissonance, right? You can hold opposing views and appreciate those opposing views simultaneously.
Way worse on all these dimensions than non-educated people. You gotta meet some non-educated people sometime.
Perhaps true. I'm actually less familiar with research that specifically relates your information processing, particularly political information processing, to education or intelligence.
Okay, to say, I will need to show you what I'm actually doing.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I think this is good to set the stage, though. I will hurry the presentation.
No, halfway in, okay?
No, I appreciate it.
We have no idea what you're doing.
Yep.
So this is sort of in response to John's question.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be some, people don't need to be morons for this process to happen. There has to be some level of incomplete processing.
Mhm.
And this, I mean, for a very simple reason, beliefs in a completely rational world, follow martingales. You shouldn't be able to predict the way your or other people's beliefs will flow based on who you're associated with or anything else in a completely rational world. This motivated several papers of mine, and I think it's very closely related to the phenomena of persuasion. That you don't have to have a lot of imperfection or irrationality, but if everyone is being completely rational, you're not going to have a process.
You can't agree to disagree. Everybody's completely
Externalities.
rational. You can't agree to disagree.
There's externalities, I hang out with people. for one
I
reason.
will though continue pushing on so we get some of the impact of this research.
Yeah.
Right. So coming into maybe what we've been discussing a little bit and where there could be more intentionality in the system, right, is coming in through content moderators. Content moderator, right now, at least we can think of this as being representative of both platform level content moderation, could include government level content moderation. I don't have a slide on that, but technically could exist, as well as peer moderation, which will be the focus of at least the specific research that I talk about. What can that do? Well, content moderators, whether intentionally or not, whether it is their goal to silence the opposing side or not, they're human. Humans have biases. Humans have biases in their judgment and decision-making and how they might interpret ambiguous situations, such as the toxicity of online content, whether it's an insult, whether it constitutes misinformation or not. And through their biased content moderation, well, they'll tend to remove some voices, right? And by removing these voices, we can further polarize and further lead to more echo
I think you're going
chambers.
with people are morons, people have interests as
Yes.
well as
Okay,
biases.
yeah.
So if I belong to the Democratic Party and I want to gain power,
Yeah.
I could be biased or unbiased, I'm gonna shut the Republicans up.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that they're morons or not morons. It could be that you're part of the Democratic Party and you have a certain point of view. It could be as well that your worldview and your beliefs are shaped by your environment subconsciously, right? And that what you rate to be misinformation or what you rate to be toxic aligns with your politics, right? Certain words, certain language, is that acceptable amongst your group, right? And that'll tend to correlate with your group's opinion and the ways in which your group communicates, and you'll be more permissive of that, where you'll be less permissive of ways in which other groups communicate. So in short, just continuing on here, we can see how this can impact echo chamber intensity, affect the polarization of the messages that individuals receive, and lead to individuals becoming more belief polarized over time. So my research will specifically look at, and of course we're diving deeper, we start narrow, we're narrowing that funnel. We're going to dive deeper into types of content moderation. First up, you have platform level content moderation. In a lot of ways, this platform level content moderation is driven by governments. So you'll see I highlighted some recent legislation here. All these acts, the Germany Nets DG, EU's the DSA, a bunch of bills in Texas, Florida, California, New York, all of them require platforms to, at least when the platform itself is moderating content, to disclose the policies that they utilize. Now, whether or not they actually follow those policies or not, or whether or not there are biases in the design of the policies or the applications of those policies, that is outside the scope, at least of this research. Probably it exists. But all this legislation requires disclosure of policy. Vast majority of them require disclosure of statistics. You'll see that in the second column here. And here you see where there's maybe more motivations for why different governments are looking to oppose this legislation. You'll see that Texas and Florida, right-leaning states, are looking to ban viewpoint discrimination. They add that explicitly to their legislation. You see the EU is specifically focused on moderating what they describe as harmful content. So for example, in Germany, they have like anti-hate speech laws, and they are mandating that from the government side and then mandating that platforms enact this anti-hate speech moderation, right? You can imagine that in the US, due to First Amendment concerns, that's a little bit harder to mandate, at least in that form, right, through that kind of reasoning. You'll see here, about 4 of them here have some requirement for users to be notified when their content is moderated at a platform level and to give them some options to appeal. And then finally, you have whether or not this legislation is facing legal challenges. The EU legislation is actually largely going through X/formerly Twitter is actually facing a fine as a result of the EU's DSA. I think it's order of magnitude like hundreds of millions. I don't remember the exact statistic on it. It's pretty large. Whereas the US legislation has largely not been implemented. There's been some push for them. They're passed, but they're facing significant challenges in both state level as well as some at the Supreme Court level right now. Any questions on this? Doing good so far? We see a lot of, and just to highlight the extent to which platform level content moderation is being politicized, and as well as compliance to this regulation. So Reddit, for example, is disclosing their statistics on what content gets removed. There's about 1 billion pieces of content, posts and comments that are posted on Reddit every single month. About 1.5% of that is removed by moderators. About the same amount is removed by admins. So here we'll see, and I'm setting up for the difference between pure moderation, pure content moderation, which is other users moderating other users, versus the platform itself. And the platform itself is subject to these standards, right? They're subject to having a set policy and at least nominally enforcing that policy. What will show for the moderators that they are not bound in those ways, right? They have essentially unlimited ability to decide whether or not content is rule breaking and then subsequently remove it. Again, just illustrating the polarization of content moderation. Trump gets elected. Facebook, very smartly, I would say, makes some moves to ingratiate themselves with the new Trump administration, showing that we are going to end essentially most of the fact checking that they do, as well as shift their content moderation teams, which were previously based largely in California, although it was pretty distributed throughout the US, and instead move them to Texas. Texas seems a very popular location for platforms as they want to show that they are more open to right-leaning points of view. TikTok, right, was facing government scrutiny. Technically, it wasn't content moderation related, but definitely there's a large political push behind this policy. And how does TikTok say, hey, look, we're really American, right? We're really American. We're very committed to American values. Well, they launched what they branded Project Texas, right, an effort to move their data processing and all US data storage into a facility in Texas with the help of Oracle. All right, so that's platform-driven the content moderation. They nominally at least are abiding by guidelines, and we see regulation that's forcing some degree in some locations of transparency and user notification. That's in contrast to user-driven content moderation. This is the fact that on these social network platforms, users get to moderate other users, right? It could be a regular Joe, just like you and me, and we get to control what other people say. I'll start out with a nominally non-political example. This is on Twitter. At the time, I believe it was Twitter. It might have been X right after this. Anyways, Twitter/X. We have Shell stations here. They're launching a relatively benign social media post. Fuel up and fill up your goals. Tell us your favorite thing about Shell station. And if you look at the responses, people are saying, hey, I love that you have the app, right? I love that you have this Upside app. I can hashtag save at the pump. Someone else is saying, hey, I live in Stockholm, Sweden. You guys have these delicious little desserts and snacks there. They're perfect for me. And you can see that if you're someone that's viewing this kind of content, you'll say, well, I'm going to infer some norms, right? Shell is a relatively well-liked company, right? People like their products. They seem pretty happy with them. As you imagine through the setup, it might not exactly be the case. How many of you use Twitter? Just curiously, as a show of hands. How many of you describe yourselves as pretty familiar with the platform? Okay. Who knows if there were hidden replies to this? If Shell doesn't want people to see certain types of content and reply to them, where would I click on this UI to find that content? Does anyone know? Would anyone like to offer a guess even?
I mean, these stink of corporate, so I would immediately say this is all, corporate supplied content. And
potentially, but what if there were dissenting voices? Where could I find those dissenting voices?
You mean?
Like, where would I click within this UI? Like, this is like literally there on your desktop, and I think that there's dissenting voices, but I'm not sure. Where could I find that out?
The three dots.
Community.
Is it the three dots?
Community notes.
So 3 dots. David, are you saying the 3 dots? So a lot of people are saying the 3 dots. It is not the 3 dots. Actually, now it is, but at the time when I took these, it's not the 3 dots. It's actually this. This little icon here. It's tiny, it's nondescript. It's something that we aren't very familiar with and don't click on very often. But if you had clicked on it, here's what Shell had hidden. Shell had hidden this comment here from Lisa Gets Politic saying, hey, you're polluting a lot. Someone here, don't know if they're a real user or not, they're saying you're taking our money out of our pockets, putting it into your bank accounts. We see a bunch of comments. In fact, the negative voices far outstrip the positive voices. People are saying you're the most expensive in town, causing lung cancer, heart disease, yada, 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 never buy your gas, so on and so forth. right? But all of these have been hidden. And given that we have a nice representative population of Twitter users, pretty experienced Twitter users in the room, you wouldn't have known that this existed, right?
Every time I see anything on Twitter, there's just a long snarky replies to everything, so.
Yep.
I'm surprised that anything's ever hidden.
Could be, right? And the thing is, like, this can be happening outside of our view, right? So yes, in this case, we probably recognize that people don't have very good opinions of Shell, right? Maybe we'd be surprised to see this. But you can imagine a lot of other topics, a lot of other discussions that we might wade into where we don't have strong priors about what people should think. And oftentimes might infer our beliefs about the topic.
I'm not a user of Twitter.
Yeah.
But who moderated that?
Shell does. Shell Gasoline.
And what site are we on? Shell Gasoline's Twitter.
It's Shell Gasoline's Twitter. Yep. Exactly that. Exactly.
Twitter,
and you can see that they've created a little, well, now X.
So you pay them a ton of money and they allow you to
No, actually, all users have this ability.
to moderate
Replies to their own tweets. Yes.
and to see how many replies will show up from the algorithm, or?
Yeah. So the hidden replies can never show up in the algorithm, and only if the user knows that this interface exists, bothers to click on it. So there's also no notification, like it doesn't show like a 5 or a 10 to let you know that there are 5 or 10 of them. Like if you wanted to find out that there was something that Shell didn't want you to see, you have to explicitly click this. And you can be clicking this on every single post you run into.
There's thing where I can say, I get to moderate all replies to my tweets.
It's on by default. If you have someone replying to your tweet, you can, I believe this interface is through the 3 dots. Anyone that's replying to your tweet, you can make them disappear. You can click here, click it, drop down and click hide.
I learned something today.
Yeah, there you go. In short, right, you can see how this, because it doesn't activate your persuasion knowledge in the same way, because based on this room at least, vast majority of people don't know that this occurs. There's a lot of room to potentially distort individuals' inferred beliefs from the content that they see through selective removal of certain points of view, right? And I'm using this as an example of a non-political context, but you can imagine that this occurs in a lot of other contexts too.
I looked at it and said instantly, this is a corporate marketing Twitter account. I wouldn't follow it in the first place.
Yeah.
And anything I read on that's going to be corporate spin, so I'm paying no attention to it whatsoever.
Definitely true.
Oh, everybody must love Shell.
Definitely true.
But there are cases where you might not know that.
How much longer do I have? Just keep
Well, we go until noon.
go until noon. So I've got actually about 45 minutes, is that right?
I mean, it really sophisticated.
And of course, I'll try and stop maybe 20 minutes ahead for it. Okay,
No.
we're doing good actually in terms of speed.
Since we're asking questions, I'll just plan to,
No, I think we're doing good in terms of pace. Just double checking.
It's less crowded lunch.
So we showed the Twitter example, right? We showed a nominally non-political example. It might be one where we have relatively strong priors, but again, a lot of cases in which we might not have those strong priors, and we actually could have our beliefs distorted by in this way. I'm going to show through this slide that it's not just Twitter. It's actually a ubiquitous aspect of all the major US-based social media platforms. So if you are on Twitter, you have the hide reply button that's shown here. If you are on Instagram, right? So you might be promoting a certain point of view, you might be promoting products, you have people that are saying things that you don't like them and it's your post, you just click hide and then poof, it's gone. And unlike in the Twitter example, whereby there is a way to see it, you have to know the UI, but you can click and see it. On Instagram, it's just gone forever. It's as if it never existed. TikTok, same thing.
Still fundamentally, you think people are morons that they're not able to do Bayesian inference. I mean, when I see any reply to anything, I know I'm not looking at a completely perfect sample of US opinion. I know I'm seeing a selected opinion of people who happen to be on Twitter and reply to this and then whatever content moderation. So nobody reads comments on Twitter and thinks this is a perfectly stratified sample of US opinion.
I mean, I agree, but for a lot of individuals, this is the best that they get, right? We have good polling on political opinion, on candidate support here in the US, but what about other issues, right? What about even nominally non-political issues, yet people could still be polarized on them? Beliefs about certain types of misinformation, beliefs about just drama that's going on, or things that are happening in your local neighborhood. The school decides to expand and they want to raise taxes by a couple % in order to fund the school expansion. Do we have great priors about whether or not people are supporting this versus not supporting it?
People are polarized, but the content is much more important than mistaken Bayesian inference about how many other people in the world share this view.
Perhaps. I guess, as a marketer, I'll describe another marketing example. Marketers engage in social media listening, right? So a lot of brands pay, social media listening firms and brand research, market research firms, a lot of money to track sentiment, right? Track sentiment towards their brand over time. And they, in doing this, are ingesting data at large scale, reading in these exact comments and determining whether or not there are more positive versus more negative mentions of your brand. Well, the fact that some of them might be missing in a non-random way, right, could distort those kinds of measurements. So yes, I recognize that, in a perfect world, we should really know that this is occurring and gather our information with a lot more caveats than we do, but we don't quite live in that perfect world, right? And people do, absolutely do, infer what other people believe based on what they're saying, right? And probably, as illustrated by this, don't know the extent to which certain voices might be missing. Right? Given that we just pulled this room and showed that, yeah, a lot of people don't know that these mechanisms exist.
I don't know if you find this supporting your view or yet another problem with this, that especially when we're talking about political issues on broadly read social media, they're dominated by political trolls. They're dominated by paid political trolls who, if you see 100 comments, 98 might be from the same person or the same group just saying the same thing over and over. It's, and I think most people who read these articles sort of understand that. So it's hard to imagine they're simply looking at the comments and using that even as a rough gauge of population views. Are you suggesting you think they are?
I would say that people, in the absence of other information, they'll use the information that they have, and that the information that they have is therefore flawed in these ways, right? I'm not saying that fake, paid actors on these platforms don't exist or bots don't exist, but this is orthogonal to that issue, right? Given that a certain amount of content is being created, whether it's organic or whether it's paid, there's certain filtering that happens, right? And some of that filtering is through the control that individuals have over the spaces that they create underneath their content.
Is your fundamental thesis where we're going?
Yeah.
It sounds like the fundamental thesis is that although people think of content moderation as making us less echo chamber and more discussion, in fact, content moderation is doing the opposite.
Definitely part of it. Definitely part of it. My goal here, while I want to share some aspects of my research, really what I wanted to talk about is just this overall ecosystem, right? That this occurs. Right, and through the discussion of all this occurring, just wanted to highlight that I'm adding that little bit.
Okay,
right?
but the content moderation bad rather than content moderation good. It's your fundamental.
On average, in our context, yes. At least insofar as you care about the level of echo chamberiness, which I've defined as the balance of information sources that individuals consume.
Yeah, well, there's also, this was Jeff's point. Content moderation says only on the 1 or 2%. It's not really shifting the average, but it certainly is punishing the extreme.
Oh, I agree. It's not that common in our context. We're on Reddit. For our subset of subreddits, we are going to see that removal rate at about 1%. That said, moderation has a chilling effect on subsequent speech, right? We're going to show, and I can show this very well empirically, I'll show it in a few slides, that your content being removed discourages you from participating in the future. So in a short run sense, yes, the effect is small, but those effects can also build up over time. And while we can't model out and don't have a lot of confidence in our ability to strictly quantify the total impact in the long term of a lot of these potential multiplier effects, there's a lot of reason to believe that these multiplier effects exist.
Because you're in the curve, you're moderating the extremes here. And so the extremes are often the most, influential as far as moving a discussion.
Definitely could be. So just continuing on, it exists everywhere. Facebook groups, again, I use the example of I'm getting news about my local community through a local Facebook group. I don't know who exactly put it together. It's one of the houses that's in my neighborhood. They're the ones that first created the Facebook group, and they could be hiding all sorts of stuff, right? That's relevant to the local politics, relevant to my community's HOA, and I wouldn't have any clue about it. And also, I don't have really strong priors about what my neighbors believe about fences, or what they believe about whether or not that house on the corner should be able to paint themselves yellow, right? I don't have really strong priors. So in the absence of that information, I really do rely on what other people are saying as a good litmus test for what general sentiment might be. Maybe that makes me a moron, so to speak. But we have here in the Reddit context, and this will be what we study because we can get great data on it, So in the Reddit context, we'll be able to recover what people were saying, as well as the profiles of the individuals that are doing the moderating are going to be public, so we can make great inferences about their political opinions. That'll be what we study. And then finally, YouTube videos just show another example here that this occurs. Things that I'll highlight is, yes, it's common to all these social media platforms first. Secondarily, most of these communities don't really have guidelines. Right? Does someone announce when you get into the Facebook group? Do you see a lot of announcements of kind of here's the standards for conduct of our Facebook group? Usually not, right? It just kind of exists. It kind of is. Same with all these different comment sections. So essentially there's no guidelines, right? The moderators themselves don't even set up guidelines in the same way that platforms at least nominally set up guidelines for how they're going to moderate. But on top of that, there's no limits. There's no transparency to this, right? When content disappears, it just goes poof. There's no one monitoring the extent to which creators are utilizing these tools or even potentially abusing these tools, right? There's no recourse. I can never challenge and then subsequently appeal, hey, my content is gone, right? There's no kind of formal mechanism for me to do so. Yeah, I can technically send a message to whoever owns the group, but they can ignore me just as easily, right? They don't need to engage in any sort of process. So you can imagine that this is a context in which abuse has a lot of potential, and it's potentially quite rife.
It's limits to who gets to be a moderator, right? So the owner of the Facebook.
Yes.
Yes, but I can't just go to Jonathan's Facebook.
No, yeah. Unless he wants you to be a moderator on his page.
So so you have to be named moderator.
You have to be named,
there are limits.
right? And ownership of these spaces is quite important. I'll save a point. I've got a point on that it might warrant a future discussion, or is a little bit more discussion, but I'll save that for a couple more slides. All right, continuing on. So we're getting into my specific research, right? My specific research is going to look at peer-to-peer moderation in the context of Reddit. A few questions that we're looking to answer here. To what extent does, I guess I'll use the animation since I bothered putting them in. To what extent does political bias influence content removal, right? Just mechanically, if we are removing some voices and not others, well, then we can shift the balance of voices within the space in the direction that we want. We'll call that a direct effect of biased content removal. Secondarily, we'll look at, well, how does content removal have indirect effects? How does it tend to silence what individuals might create in the future? So we know both through my research as well as broader research that individuals like engagement on their content. Getting engagement on your content, whether that's people liking your content, whether that's people commenting on your content saying, yeah, that's a great comment that you made, or I agree, or just engaging in discussion with you. That's going to encourage you to participate more in the future. Well, of course, if your content is removed, then you're not going to get any likes. You're not going to get anyone replying to you, right? Additionally, too, in some cases, you might be aware that you're being silenced. Right? Usually the way that these platforms work is that if you're logged in, you don't see anything as amiss, right? From your logged in view, you see your content as if it existed just when you created it. But from others' views, then you see that it's missing. So technically speaking, you can find out that your content's missing and then know, all right, well, my voice isn't very welcome here, and that might discourage future speech. Yeah.
You're assigning a lot of monopoly power to these things. Now, it was hard to compete with the New York Times if you didn't like their editorials back in the day, but there's nothing easier than starting a new Facebook group. And if people don't like the content moderation, they move. So
that's exactly
it's more about, you have to supply what people demand. It's not so much about the evil of the suppliers. It's about that people seem to like it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I agree 100% that the extent to which this is a problem is the extent to which there are barriers to creating a new community. And the problem is that oftentimes online, there is a lot of barrier, though, to creating a new community, right? Can you create a new New York Times, right? Is it easy to launch a new newspaper? How many kind of large newspapers have we seen launched in the past few decades?
Very easy to launch a new Facebook group or a new next door group.
Technically, yes, but these online spaces have very, very strong network effects. So there's already a community. I'll use my local Facebook group. The community is called Bella Vista. There's already a Bella Vista Facebook group. All of the people that utilize Facebook, there's like 100 households. There's at least like 150 people that are already on there. It's going to be very hard. It's a very challenging coordination problem to get all those individuals to switch over, right? Yes, some level of abuse by the current moderator of that Facebook group will cause people to switch and will cause them to flip over and make their own group. But they can probably tolerate a lot before they decide to jump ship in this way.
Snapchat said before Instagram came along.
Yeah.
Twitter said before TikTok came along.
I mean, I agree, but this is on a individual creator level. Creating a new community is more challenging than you think. Maybe I'll give you another illustration of the value of community, right? Community in a lot of ways is like celebrity, right? You say, all right, well, I can't get this one celebrity to promote my product. Why don't I just look to these other celebrities? Why does the individual endorsement that my product receives, why does it matter, right? And that's because it is hard to create a celebrity in this way, right? It requires the coordination, it requires the branding, it requires everyone to confluence around a certain point of view in a particular manner. And doing that, while it's definitely, there's no legal limitations to you doing so, there's a lot of practical limitations to you doing so, right? It is quite hard. So yes, the extent to which it's easy to spin up new communities will definitely moderate the results I'm going to show you. The other thing that I'm going to show you is that of the communities that we study, this new community creation essentially doesn't happen. We don't see a lot of overlaps whereby there are two communities that discuss the same topic. This will be coming into the Reddit context. So this is the indirect effect, like I mentioned, chilling effect of your content being removed on your subsequent participation. And then we're going to look to aggregate these two. We're going to do a short-term simulation. You could say it's like back of the envelope-ish simulation to aggregate up these effects and talk about what happens, at least in the near term, when moderators exhibit some bias. Some challenges, I think these are going to be less relevant to the group, so I won't go through all of them. The main ones that I'll highlight are just ones we've discussed before. Content removals are typically unobserved. So the fact that we're able to study this in the Reddit context and see what was missing is, I think, a real strength of this research. Second thing that we'll highlight is that moderator profiles are public. People participate a lot on Reddit, and therefore they leave a lot of, you could say, digital breadcrumbs that indicate their political leaning. We separate out between legitimately harmful content that is moderated by the platform itself, because the platform itself does a lot of its own moderation. So this is already the content must exist and not been taken away by the platform. And given that it abides by the platform standards, now the moderators are also stepping in and saying, hold on now, I don't think that this content is right.
So your data is just going to be on the moderator removals?
Yes, moderator removals, and we're able to separate these out from the platform removals.
Because I think the platform removals would be very interesting too.
Oh, absolutely.
Platforms weren't just removing harmful content,
Yeah.
or what they called harmful content
Yep.
was often based on political reasons.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And to that, the only thing I can say is it's outside the scope of this particular research. So I highlighted, and thus the discussion on kind of the government and platforms' interest in moderating content, but this is kind of on top of that.
Is it actually visible though? When the platform removes content, is that visible? Moderator remove content is.
Yeah, sometimes is the answer here. So if the comment has children, then it will be visible. If it doesn't have children, it will not be visible. And by children, I mean if someone had replied to it already. So a lot of the content, I'd say, I don't have the exact stat, but a vast majority of the content that the platform removes doesn't have any children, and therefore would be completely invisible from the general public's point of view. The same thing actually happens with moderator removals. For moderator removals, if it has children, then it will show as removed and you'll know that something exists. If it didn't have children, it goes poof into the ether. At least from the general viewer's point of view. We're going to use some nice tricks from the Reddit API in order to recover that content. All right. So all that said, Reddit is organized into independently governed communities called subreddits. They can be quite massive. They're much larger than my little kind of community Facebook group. You have them largely organized around interests. They could be interests, they could be identities, they could be hobbies, they could be geographic locations. And specifically in our context, we'll look at those geographic location subreddits because they are major hubs for discussion of local politics. Does anyone know, if you want to discuss kind of things that are happening here at Stanford in a Reddit community, what the best Reddit community is for it? Someone browse Reddit for it. It's r/Bay Area. r/Bay Area is essentially the place if you wanted to have those discussions on Reddit. And if you didn't like r/Bay Area, unfortunately, there's not really any alternative. You could technically create your own, but the growth of new communities is in general quite hard, and you'd struggle to get more than 10 people on this community. So do we think that we'd be able to attract a very large audience? Do you think we'd be able to have very rich discussions? Probably not. It's probably quite challenging. And we also see this in the data in that there's no r/Bay Area 2, or no /r/Bay _ area, or Bay _ area, or San Francisco Bay Area. There's nothing preventing people from creating these, and yet they don't exist in any real number.
Something smaller, like Palo Alto or Stanford. 'Cause
Technically r/Palo Alto exists. I think it's like tiny. It's pretty tiny.
yeah, there's next door. It's pretty.
Yes, and technically you have other platforms that are available to you. Absolutely, absolutely.
That's not about politics. It's
Yeah,
about somebody
yeah.
made noise last night.
The challenge too of other platforms, a lot of users don't multi-home. Some users multi-home, but a lot of them will, primarily because they're getting all sorts of other information, they have their friends, they have kind of other entertainment on these platforms, they'll tend to get their social media information from just the one single platform. So yeah, subreddits, we'll look at these. Users are sharing content that are there. We're gonna specifically, I messed up the animation on this. We'll specifically look at comments on this research. Why are we looking at comments? It's because comments are more likely to express individuals' opinions. A lot of the posts themselves tend to be news stories. And in fact, a lot of subreddits have the requirement that the post that you create has to be the news story and it has to share its title with the article itself. So there's not a lot of room for editorialization. Whereas the comments have editorialization, right? This news occurred and now we see what people think about it. Subreddits are moderated by volunteer moderators. I said that I'd highlight r/Bay Area. If you live in this area, and I used to browse the subreddit a good amount for information on the comings and goings in the area, local events that are going on. People share like nice photos. They say this is the Bay Area's most photogenic tree. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. But here's the list of individuals that have control over what you say on that platform. And if any single one of them doesn't like what you say, well, they just click 2 buttons, click the open interface and then click the remove, and then poof, that information is gone.
Can you find that list? Can anyone find that list?
Yes, this list is public.
Okay.
So yeah, publicly available, but you need to be logged into a Reddit account. That was a change that they made, I want to say like a year and a half ago or so. But yeah, it's public and known, and all these profiles are public too. So you can click on any of these individuals and see where have they commented, where have they posted before. And by default, all of your content, I don't think you can create even private content on Reddit. So all of your posts, all of your comments, if you're creating them for people to see, they must be public for the entire public. The other interesting thing about this is, and speaking to the durability of these subreddits, essentially the people that are on this list, the moderators that are chosen, you can draw a direct line from them to the very first person that had the idea to create a subreddit that's called r/Bay Area back in 2008. Right, so in 2008, it used to be that Reddit only had kind of main Reddit and everyone's on the same feed. Then they launched some Reddit allowed subreddits. So they organized their platform into topics. And they said, hey, why not let users create their own topics? And essentially, the person that chose r/Bay Area, well, now they have it. r/Bay Area, it's not the most recognizable domain name, but this also happened with, and this is in our data, r/Chicago, r/San Francisco, r/California. Right? And you can imagine, like, these domain names are incredibly, incredibly valuable. It is very unlikely that you're going to be able to usurp r/California with r/State of California or r/California too, because people are going to be like, well, why would I ever navigate towards there? All the search engines are pointing to a subreddit with a canonical matching name to the terms that people are searching. Right? People search California subreddit, it'll return the subreddit named r/California. So for those reasons, your ability to create competing subreddits is incredibly limited. These subreddits are incredibly sticky. And essentially, whoever first had this idea in 2008, well, they're king. There's no mechanism to remove them. If the users on the platform, if they all say, hey, I don't like this individual, I want them to be removed as moderator, tough cookies, right? The best they can do is all decide collectively to go somewhere else. And for the reasons I mentioned, that's hard. You guys will be less interested in this, so we'll go through it pretty quickly. But essentially, the way that we're going to be able to recover content is to look at what currently exists and see that it has removed indicators, and then look into an archiving service that's called PushShift. And if we knew that it was archived before and it existed upon creation, and now it's removed now, well, now we know what was removed. Yes, question?
Reddit itself, for, say, its political reasons,
Yeah.
couldn't remove a moderator or
Reddit
couldn't it can.
Reddit, the platform can. Yeah, so the owners of the platform can. But the regular users, right, you and me that participate here, they cannot. And this has been despite a lot of user disagreement. Reddit has only a couple of times over the course of its history removed moderators of subreddits. Usually that has been, there was like one large-scale protest whereby moderators in protest of the platform decided to allow pornography and switched the content of their subreddits from regular discussion content to pornography as a form of protest. Reddit stepped in that case.
But if, say, 5 years ago, Jay Bhattacharya wanted to create a subreddit on COVID policy.
Yeah.
Would he be able to do that, or would Reddit?
You need to find a unique subreddit name, but conditional upon him being able to find something that someone.
I don't want to step in and say, we don't like the content here?
Generally don't. They've been relatively hands-off. And they've been pretty good at sticking to that policy. They're relatively non-interventionalist in the comings and goings of the subreddit moderators.
Yeah.
Except in cases of like extreme abuse. Again, pornography, there were subreddits that were promoting a bunch of illegal content, drugs, child sexual abuse material, stuff like that. Like those got shut down.
I don't know about Reddit, but I can't think of a major social media platform that was open to and not banning, for this example, alternate views on COVID policy.
Reddit actually did not take a lot of action related to that. Compared to other platforms. And COVID policy was a relatively unique one, right? Whereby you saw this big push, of course, coming in from the Biden administration, a big push to look to regulate what they call, COVID-19 misinformation, right? But very few other political discussions had that government push and had the same level of government argument and interest in censoring certain topics, right? So yeah, we're going to be able to recover removed content. Just to show some examples of removed content, you have thousands of individuals that were commenting on, if you guys knew, there was like Chesa Bowden, I think the DA, I think this was like 2022, 2023 or so. I think it's 2022, if not 2021, around that time period. But you see, people are talking, thousands of individuals have gathered, a lot of people are discussing what's going on, and you see comments that are being removed, right? And within the regular user's view, because this comment had children, then it shows up as removed. Again, if it didn't have any children, then it just go poof, just disappear. Because it had children, it shows up here. And we're able to, by looking into the archives, given that this still has a content ID, look for that same content ID in the archives and know that this is what someone said. Someone said Bowden is losing virtually every neighborhood with lots of non-white voters except for the Mission. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, he's winning a lot of places with a lot of progressive whites and nowhere else. Seems fair enough, right? Reasonable comment, non-toxic, seemingly shouldn't be removed, and yet it got removed, right? And we'll be looking at instances of this, right? What happens when people are making this content? We'll look to classify the political sentiment that's contained within this content, classify the political sentiment of the moderators, and look at what happens when those two are just in disagreement with each other.
Who's the moderator that ran it group?
What's up? The head moderator? Yeah. The head moderator is U/dihydrogen monoxide. Their profile is public, but they are anonymous, so we have no clue who this person is. But they are a direct descendant, if you can check who is the one who created it. I'm not sure if they were the one who created it. But they're either the one who created it or a direct descendant of the person who created it in 2008. So again, if you're the first moderator, you can appoint as many moderators as you want underneath you, but they can never remove you, right? Your moderator list is strictly hierarchical. So you can dismiss anyone that's below you, and you can do nothing about those that are above you. So the person at the top is essentially the king.
And can you see which moderator removed a specific comment?
No, we cannot. We cannot. Yeah, so in our analysis, we'll aggregate the political opinions of the active moderators on the platform. All right. Just continuing to go through just recovery techniques.
Can the other moderators see which moderator removed something?
Oh, sorry. Yes, if you are a moderator on the platform, so these, like 10 users or so, if you were one of them, your view will show that like, oh, Dantastic was the one that removed this piece of content. But from a public view, of course, that's not possible. Yeah.
Do you look at all at diversity of opinions within the moderator group when you analyze?
So what we found is that it's not very informative. And the reason for that is you get a lot of, because you can't remove anyone that's above you, you get a lot of moderators that essentially exist as shell accounts that haven't participated in a while. What we found in our communities is that they'll typically have just one or two moderators that are actually active, and therefore the diversity of political opinions isn't really reflective of who's doing those removals. But that was something that we immediately thought of and wanted to explore. It's just that this aspect of the structure of the subreddit governance didn't lend itself very well to it.
Get paid,
What's up?
especially in the corporate context, wouldn't you pay a moderator to go through and start deleting stuff for you?
Definitely could. Yeah, moderator, social media manager, you definitely companies
Presumably
that run
must be
social
paid,
media
right?
accounts are probably doing so.
This is valuable. If you're the moderator of a big discussion in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Gotta believe they're being paid by somebody, right? Because you can just remove content.
There have been accusations of it. There have been very few proven
It's not
cases.
illegal, right?
It's against the subreddit terms of service. So if Reddit were to find out, then you would get kicked off, and potentially the entire subreddit team would get kicked off. I think actually that was one of the reasons why Reddit had stepped in the past and then removed moderators. From what we understand, right, I don't have great kind of empirical data to back this up, but from what we understand, a lot of moderators act similarly to Substack contributors or Wikipedia editors. They're people that are very passionate about these subjects. They like contributing their free labor. I would be very surprised if there was any sizable fraction of them that were compensated. Pretty much all of them do this for free. All right. Our data sets, I apologize on the blur, the graying out, but we'll have 110 location-based communities. They cover the 50 US states and large cities and geographic areas. We'll observe them from, I did do it right. We'll observe them over a 1-year period from August 10th, 2021 to 2022 and look at their removals decisions. I'll go quick. I'll try and wrap this up in about 5 minutes or so we can save 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. About 1% of comments were removed. Here you see them, the sizes of these communities. Most of them are pretty large. Again, pretty difficult to usurp, pretty difficult to have the coordination problem of moving all the individuals that exist in these communities to another one. You'll also see that the state communities are all exact string matches. So these are all, and we struggled to find any states that had a similarly sized community, even in the same order of magnitude, to the existing ones. And that's because the domain name is so incredibly strong, right? You have like the cars.com domain, right? That's valuable. In the same way, having r/Wyoming is valuable. We're going to, and I'll just keep this a little bit simple. We'll utilize some training corpuses of data on Reddit, look at people that belong to certain right-leaning and left-leaning subreddits and use them as training examples, right? And classify other users' political sentiment based on the extent to which they use language similar to those individuals that participated in these politically aligned subreddits. We have a machine learning pipeline that we utilize for this. I'll just illustrate a little bit of the difficulty of classifying political leanings from text. How many of you are familiar with the phrase, "Let's go Brandon"? Familiar? You'll notice that it has no semantic relationship with the political meaning that's contained within, right?
What does it mean?
"Let's go Brandon." It's F. Joe Biden was what it was. So it came from, a fun story, it came from a NASCAR interview. Right, so there's a NASCAR interview, you have the crowd in the background that's saying F Joe Biden, and then the reporter very dutifully says to the NASCAR winning racer or someone like that, "Oh yeah, the crowd is saying let's go Brandon" in the background, right? And it was so patently ridiculous that it became a meme and then became a code word for F Joe Biden. Okay, well, you see no semantic meaning relationship between the phrase "let's go Brandon" and what it looks to evoke. Some other challenges from a natural language processing standpoint, it exhibits what's called sentiment inversion. Essentially, the phrase itself is very positive, and yet it's used to mean something that's incredibly negative. It's also very unstable, right? So if we substitute any of those terms, then the reference to the original event is lost, and therefore it no longer has that meaning, right? "Let's go Mark" means something very different than "let's go Brandon," right? But "let's go Mark" and "let's go Brandon," Mark and Brandon are used very similarly within text. So these tokens are going to be incredibly similar, and most natural language processing algorithms will utilize the similarity of placement and occurrence of tokens as an indication of how close they are, right? So it represents a challenge from there. Again, external knowledge, a specific temporal window. So if this comment was created before 2020, then it is legitimate and the person actually means let's go Brandon. It's only after this specific interview that suddenly it flips. It flips in meaning overnight. Finally, and then making it a little bit more challenging, there's a lot of polysemy, essentially, different meanings from the same terms or ambiguity in its usage. So initially, it became code word for F. Joe Biden, right? And then it gains popularity, then people are utilizing it ironically, right? Joe Biden has an accomplishment and is doing something good or kind of owns the Republicans, so to speak. And people are cheering, let's go Brandon, right? In response to it. They might be using it genuinely or ironically or mockingly towards individuals that express this point of view. And in short, it's part of a meme-based evolving language, right? So there's a lot of difficulty in classifying political meanings from text. What do we do then, right? Given that a lot of the text models, including actually very advanced ones, right? ChatGPT 4o Mini, which came out just within the past year or so, does very badly at classifying political meanings from the text only. And that's because text is so heavily contextual, right? So much of the comments are like, he should be in jail, right? Well, who is he? Why should they be in jail, right? Sarcasm, humor, all sorts of different ways that we encode our speech through our regular conversation, and especially online. So it's doing pretty badly there. What's our solution to this? Actually, we can get very high, 97% classification accuracy when we add in subreddit co-participation. So we're going to take the simplifying assumption that people are stable in their political views, right? That they're not going to be right-leaning when they comment in one place and left-leaning when they comment in another, but rather that they're either kind of right-leaning or left-leaning and that that's stable over time. And therefore, we can look at the friends that they keep. And the friends that they keep tell a lot about your political orientation, right? If you're someone that enjoys the Joe Rogan subreddit and enjoys the Joe Rogan podcast, well, more likely than not, you're going to be more right-leaning. What if you participate in r/coronavirus, right, which tracks new cases that are spreading, news about the vaccine developments? Well, you're going to tend to be more left-leaning. You participate in r/television, more left-leaning, 2X chromosomes, women's subreddit, women's issues, feminism, diversity, those kinds of discussions. Well, you're going to be more left-leaning. And we do this not just for this set, but we have, I think, like 500 or 600 subreddits that we use to encode political leaning. Yes?
Just a quick clarification. What's the ground truth used to generate these numbers?
Yes, the ground truth that was used was we withhold like 20% of the comments to be our testing set of these political comments. So people that are upvoted and then participated in communities that express specifically their group membership. Yeah. Okay, continuing on, we're going to define political adversity as just the gap between the moderator sentiment and the user sentiments. We'll put them on a 0 to 1 scale and say, some people are closer together, some people are farther away together. We'll consider adversity to be positive if it's towards the other side of you, and negative if it's towards the same side as you. So if you're a moderator and you're at 0.4, you're relatively centrist, but you're left-leaning, well then this is negative adversity when they're on the same side as you, but more extreme. Most moderators lean left on the platform. About 1% of comments are removed. We'll just skip through a lot of these just for the interest of time. I want to show you the reduced form evidence, right? What happens when moderators and users differ in points of view? Well, if they are negative adversity, they support the same side as you, as they're more extreme. There's a slight increase there, but the biggest increase is when there's some significant gap between your point of view and the other individual's point of view. Right, and this is reflected in the removal rates. Base removal rate, again, is around 0.9 or so. You see that jumps up to 1.5% for those individuals that are at least 0.5 away in terms of political distance.
Is the person getting, or the particular comment?
The comments. But comments are very correlated amongst individuals because we are utilizing your co-participation as an indication of your political sentiment.
The fact is that this comment got removed, not this person got removed.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
No, but the comment, you're not reading the comment itself. You are classifying the person.
We classify both the text of the comment and
I thought the whole one
the
was the
person's.
text. You can't tell from the text whether it's left or right.
I mean, it's somewhat indicative. It's not great, so this is showing the low predictive accuracy, but it still enters into the model.
So you're using a little bit of the comment, a little bit of the person to figure out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good.
Well, like the y-axis on
Yeah.
that graph, which was the percent removed, that's
Yep.
the percent of comments by an individual.
Percent of all individuals that are in this bucket. So we're kind of bucketing individuals into like bins that are like
Percent of all
0.05
individuals
away.
who have had one comment removed.
who, of all comments that are in that bucket. So of all comments that are
So,
between 0.45 and 0.5 distance from the moderator, about 1.5% of those are
The
removed.
distance is the person's distance or the
The
comments?
comments
The
distance.
comments distance.
The comments distance, yep.
And
Common
I-
distance from the moderator as a person.
Yeah, yeah,
and I
from
have a
the,
question.
yes, David.
David Henderson here. Can I say, well, let me just make a comment and see if I'm right.
Yeah.
I find this incredibly optimistic because 1.5% is a low number. Am I thinking wrong about that?
I mean, that's definitely,
it seems to me what it's saying is most people are within the bounds.
I can agree with that, but there's the two challenges, right? First is that this is will be a short-run model of the impact, and that will show through the subsequent analysis that more removals leads to less participation in the future. So there's a lot of potential multiplier effects within this domain. Secondarily, I think it's actually kind of impressive even that a moderator can remove 1% of comments, because you look at the number of moderators that are there on the subreddit, there are only 10 moderators, and of these 10 moderators, I think only like 1 or 2 accounts are really active, right? You get a lot of zombies that are just sticking around because they can't be removed. It's actually really impressive in some ways that one person can remove 1% of the comments from tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of individuals. So I don't know, different ways of looking at it, right? And I'm not trying to say through this story that this is the only way that echo chambers form, but rather that there is an additional marginal effect that's coming in from the fact that moderators exhibit bias, and that this kind of research hasn't been done before, and we're actually able to quantify it and quantify it pretty well. So that's the total impact.
Well, you just said, I'm still confused on my question. Is it 1% of the comments from an individual who's a certain distance from you?
Of all individuals that are that distance, yeah.
Okay, well,
So just
and
aggregating.
it's not 1% of the comments that have political content that's that distance away from you. It's 1% of individuals who you've classified.
It's the other one, the first one that you described.
So you actually look at the comments.
Yeah. Yep.
So when you say you remove 1% of the comments that are far away from me,
Yeah.
that might only be 1 out of 1,000 comments, though.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So there's, of course, going to back to the diagram, there's people that exist and have density in each of these regions as well. And the same thing occurs, you might say that maybe we should have more representation on the other side as well, right? They're also exhibiting increased
What's
removal rates.
confusing, you keep saying there's people that exist.
Yes.
The people is irrelevant if you're, it sounds like you're making the decision
Okay.
based on the comment.
Yeah.
Comment setting.
I'm just saying people are creating those comments is what I mean by that. Yeah. So the comments are getting removed, but of course that impacts like an individual is the shorthand that I'm saying here. Just in interest of time, we do some modeling around it. We utilize a relatively simple logit model. We control for a lot of the correlates, or sorry, not the correlates, a lot of potential other reasons why content might be legitimately removed. The challenge with this is that, we're not going to argue that these are strictly causal, and strictly causal in a biased sense is relatively difficult, right? Because there are a lot of correlates of your political opinion that could be included in the model, but individuals could still be biased against them. Right, so you think of like we could create a text feature like someone likes hunting, right? Likes hunting. Well, that's going to be relatively collinear with political orientation, relatively collinear with the adversity of that comment, but bias against people that like hunting is probably still a form of political bias, right? So that's a little caveat that we'll put on this. In short, we find that 0.5 increase in adversity isn't going to increase your removal odds by 45%, depending on the model, or 15%, depending on if you choose the more versus less permissive model. We'll highlight in the same way, we're able to utilize a propensity score matching approach based on your, we have this direct model of removal. So we have the likelihood that you will have some number of comments being removed, but then you actually realize that removal or you don't. Right, so we're going to compare individuals that a priori had the same likelihood of having some number of comments removed and use that to find the chilling effect of actually having a comment removed. What do we find in terms of that chilling effect? We find that having at least one comment removed in the prior week is going to causally decrease your odds of participating in the next week by 19%. And in terms of the extensive margin, it's going to decrease your next week's comment quantity by 3%. We also do a counterfactual simulation to aggregate up the total impact of these effects. So we'll utilize the Simpson Index as a measure of diversity of content. It has a very simple interpretation. The Simpson Index would be the likelihood that any two randomly drawn comments from within that space agree in orientation. So 100% Simpson Index would be perfect uniformity, that always you're going to draw two comments that share the same orientation. 50% would be perfect diversity. Yes?
In the previous slide,
Yeah.
did you distinguish between, I guess it's technically two previous slides as well,
Yeah.
but do you distinguish the people who the people replying to them, the children, I think you call them,
Yeah.
are agreeing with them versus the ones who don't? Because it could just be peer pressure, right? If I post something, everyone hates it,
Yeah.
and then it also gets removed, I might just stop posting because everyone hated me, rather than because it was removed, versus a person the other way around, right? I could imagine a person who posts something, everyone agrees with me,
Yep.
and then get removed. I might actually go the other direction and start posting more.
Yep.
So do you distinguish between those?
We
two
don't
groups?
distinguish, and part of the challenge within that analysis is that the active removal also decreases your subsequent engagement. So a lot of content is removed before you could get hate, right? Or before you could get dislikes or get people disagreeing with you because, of course, it's gone and now they
But
can't
there's
interact with it.
thousands of things removed, so you can, there should be at least a significant amount of ones that
We
capture.
definitely could. We definitely could, and I'll try to look into that. Yeah. Just to summarize things up, we find that on average, communities become less diverse as a result of content moderation. Can go up to about 1% or so change in the Simpson Index, 1% increase in likelihood that any two comments agree with each other in political orientation. On average for communities, that's going to be about 1/8%. And some of them actually get more diverse as a result of content moderation, and that's because the moderator disagrees with the majority view of the community. So you could in fact increase diversity by actually taking away some of the majority view. That's relatively rare. The other thing that I'll highlight is that more active moderators, those that remove more, also tend to increase the change in Simpson Index. So more active moderators, the more change that we're going to see. Some of that's mechanical, but some of that's also coming in from the fact that more active moderators also tend to, on average, engage in more biased moderation. I've got just a couple minutes here. You've got some summaries, but you already got the flavor of this research, right? I'll just end with a little bit in terms of what we can do about it. From the Reddit side, some things that they might want to consider is, I'll just kind of go over to here. They might want to consider increasing kind of auditing and transparency, collecting features on this. I spoke to some individuals at Reddit. I'm actually going to give a talk to them in about 2 weeks or so to share this research as well. But they have some increasing interest in at least collecting some statistics on this, right? Conducting some auditing, determining the extent to which this might be occurring. Some other mitigations, you could think of automated methods, right? Not to say that algorithms don't have bias, but they probably have less bias, or at least the less potential for extreme bias than individuals. So bringing in some automation might help there. Automation can also help scale up auditing and transparency. Platform policy changes, such as making it easier to create new communities and therefore foster kind of people switching over if there is potential bias by existing moderators, changing policies such as the visibility of removed content, and therefore creating public pressure on the moderators to stop exhibiting in these biased removals could also be beneficial. More broadly, I think this comes to your point really well. One way that we might look to tackle this is just more media literacy, more education, have people recognize that these spaces are controlled by individuals that might have some degree of bias, treat information more skeptically, probably helps in mitigating this, right? Probably helps the degree to which you are inferring strong signals from what you see, right? And instead take that with a little bit of skepticism.
Haven't posed any evidence that people don't know that this is happening and don't care that it's happening.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We don't let the Marxists and the classical liberalism, they're all happy about it. That's a joke. We do actually.
We could try to foster in the longer term more platforms that are designed for pluralistic discussion. Think about algorithms that are recommending content less based on whether or not you'd engage with it and try and promote a more diverse point of view. There's questions of whether or not that's desirable, questions of whether or not that's overreach, but I'm listing it as a possibility. And the same thing could happen from the government side, right?
It's just we. And you can start that pluralistic discussion in Reddit anytime you want.
That's true, absolutely. But the government could have some role in encouraging this, whether that's the use of kind of the bully pulpit, so to speak, right, to promote these discussions, or as we'd seen from a platform policy side, right, they're pushing platforms to disclose these moderation policies. They could also push these platforms to make removals more transparent and let them know when there's peer moderation, also notify other users. There's questions of whether or not that'd be desirable, questions of whether or not that would be within the kind of rights of the government and within the rights of the platform to be forced into taking these actions, but at least theoretically, that's likely to help mitigate some of the issues that we described here. I know that we're at the end of time. I don't know if we tend to go over or not, but I'm happy to take maybe a last question or
We
something.
should probably end right at noon.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. This
No,
was-
thank you. Thank you. Appreciate all of your time. It's been a pleasure being here. I've got a nice little diagram of Sisyphus pushing the globe up a hill. It speaks to the challenges of content moderation, and definitely check out the paper that's on SSRN, and it's under review at Management Science right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.